Today I'm going to show you all my favorite rulers while I prep my pants pattern to make some new pants for my 3-day pants fitting workshop coming up this weekend. Before we get started with my rulers, I just want to show you, I got this plaid linen fabric from Fabric Mart last week. It was one of Sue's picks, and it's a suiting linen, so they recommended dry clean only. Of course, I threw it in the washing machine and it came out beautiful, and it's a lot softer. So I'm going to be washing the whole 3 yards that I purchased to make some linen trousers. I'm working with my Sorsha Classic Slim trousers, and you may have seen me wearing red linen trousers that I made last year, and I want to make another pair, but I've changed a little bit in my shape and weight. So I'm going to trace off the pattern I used to make my red linen trousers so I can test fit before I cut into my plaid linen. So what I want to do is show you how I trace a pattern and then the tools that help make quick work of it. So today it's all about essential rulers. So let's start with my favorite ruler to have when I'm drafting or fitting pants, especially pants. It's my 48-inch metal ruler. This ruler is really indispensable for establishing grain lines, drawing center balance lines, and getting a straight edge anytime you need a longer line. So let me just show you what I'm working on here. What I did here is I measured the distance using another favorite ruler. This is my Clear Grid 18-inch ruler, and if you don't have one of these, I highly recommend getting one because this is like my staple for drafting, because you can see through it, and it's got 1/8, 1/16, half-inch, and inch markings all on one ruler, so it's very convenient, and it's see-through, which makes it nice to work with. So I measured down at the hem and found my center, and I made a little mark there, and then I measured my knee and I found the center there as well, and I made a mark. So to get my grain line, what I'm going to do now is, I'm just going to move this over a little bit. I'm going to use my 48-inch ruler, and I'm going to line up the edge of the ruler with both marks, and if I do that accurately, I know that the grain line or the center balance line is going to be straight all the way up to the top, because I'm not trying to use a shorter ruler and connect the line. So for example, if I just had this ruler, I would draw a line here, and then I would have to scoot it up and draw a line, and then I would draw a line, and by the time I get to the waist, it's very likely it's going to be off a little. So I like having one straight edge like this, lining it up from hem to knee in the center of the pattern, and I'm just going to draw my grain line like this, and it's going to go through both of my marks. Now I have my center balance line, which is also my grain line in this case. You'll notice that it's not the same as the printed line on the pattern. The printed line on the pattern is the grain line, but it's not in the center, depending on what size you use and also what alterations you make to the pattern piece. So now I've got my center. The next thing I'm going to do here is to start tracing this leg, is I'm going to just mark which line on my alphanumeric paper lines up with that. So you can see here, this paper, I absolutely love this paper for drafting and fitting because it's got a 1-inch grid on it, and it makes it very easy to see if things are straight. So I marked the line that was sort of agreeing with where my center balance line of my pants are. So I'm just gonna go ahead and just draw a line along my grid. And notice I'm doing that first before I start tracing my pattern. All right, now I don't need this anymore, so I'm going to put that aside. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put my pattern on my paper. I'm going to line up the center balance line on my paper pattern with the center balance line I drew on my pattern paper like this. And notice this pattern is kind of wrinkled up. I've had this pattern now for a long time. I've used it, I've looked at it. So it's very important when you're tracing a pattern to make sure this is all squished down. So I'm going to go ahead and use my bigger pattern weights on the wrinkles, and then I'm going to use some smaller pattern weights to hold things like the tip of the crotch and maybe up at the side seam there, so that stays nice and flat. So now I've got a nice flat pattern, and instead of tracing all around, I'm going to use my rulers to fill it in after I mark it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to slide the whole thing down a little bit so I can show you. So the crotch I need to mark, and notice I'm not drawing a solid line, I'm just dashing along my edge. And I like to use a Sharpie marker because I can see that I'm getting right on the edge. If I catch my paper a little bit, I know I'm right on the edge there. And then I'm just going to mark across my back waist like that. And then I'm going to make a bracket or an L-shaped bracket there. And then I'm just going to dash down the hip curve like this. Now when I get to my knee line, which is right here, I'm going to go ahead and draw a line out like that. I'm just going to slide this back up here like this. I'm going to mark my knee here as well. And then I'm going to do my inseam from the crotch to the knee. Now, what do I have down here on the bottom part of the pattern? I have a rectangle. So I'm not going to draw that. All I'm going to do, I'm just going to bring this up so you can see what I'm doing. I'm basically going to make an L-shaped bracket here and an L-shaped bracket here. Okay, and that's it. Now let's look and see what my tracing looks like. Let's start at the bottom portion of my pattern. I have another ruler I really like, my 36-inch metal ruler. I like that if I need to get straight lines that are longer than my 18-inch clear grid ruler. So I'm going to check that first, and you can see that's a little bit too short to really get in there. So I'm going to use my 36-inch straight edge, and I'm just going to line up the ruler with where I stopped tracing the side seam at the knee down to that L-shaped bracket like that. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here. So I'm going to match right here down to my L-shaped bracket like this. Okay, and then I can just go straight across here and get my hem. All right, so that takes care of my straight edges. So I like to use the blue, or not necessarily blue, but the clear grid 18-inch ruler to measure, to find the middle of things or to find my measurements. I'm using the 48-inch metal ruler to do my long grain lines, and then I have this 36-inch ruler that I love when this is not long enough. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move my pattern up to the top of the pattern now. You don't necessarily need a French curve, so I'm going to show you how to use a clear grid ruler in addition to the French curve. But let's start with the French curve because it really makes quick work of things, and I want to show you the right way to use it. So I'm going to fill in or draw a solid line in my back crotch here now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the straight edge of my French curve to get the straight portion like this. Okay, and then as I start to come to the actual curve, I'm going to I'm going to find on my ruler where it agrees, the longest distance on the curve. So right here, I can get from here to here, and then I can turn the ruler around and I can get from here to here. Okay, and then when I do my inseam, I should be able to get the entire inseam in one swish. Now it might be slightly off here. I don't know. So see how it's curving in more than the ruler here? I don't know necessarily if that's a bad thing, because I want to make a fuller pair of pants here. So I'm just gonna find a line that agrees with my French curve like this. So see, it's not agreeing with that. I might be okay with that. I can fine-tune the inseam when I get into my fitting, and actually I'm going to add an inch of a fitting allowance there anyway, so I'll be able to work that out in my final answer when I get there. But the whole idea is you want to find the best part of the ruler. If I wanted to follow that curve, I would have gone like this. And you can see that's a closer line to there, but I'm just going to leave it out there for now. So that's how you use a French curve. Now let me show you, if you don't have a French curve and you don't feel like that's in your, bucket list of things that you want to have, let me show you how I would do a curve with a straight edge. What I would do is I would literally use the straight edge to connect my dashes like this. And you could use the long edge. It's just you only want to trace for as long as it's agreeing. So you might have to go from edge to edge here. But you can see, you can get a pretty good, accurate line by using a straight edge if you just work your way, from dash to dash. It's not as smooth, but again, I'm going to be adding a safety seam allowance on here to test it. So this line that I'm drawing now doesn't need to be, pristine. But basically now you can see I can just follow along with the straight edge. And then I'll just do the top of the waist. I'm going to have to add some paper here when I add my fitting allowance above the waist. But basically that's how I would use my favorite rulers. So I've got my Workhorse clear grid ruler. Another thing you can use this for is to measure curves, because it bends. So let me just show you that. Let's say I wanted to know what this edge was. I can just measure it like this. Get it right on there. And actually this is kind of fun because it's almost exactly 18 inches because it goes from waist, it might be a scant 1/8 inch shorter, but you can measure curved edges with it. You can see through it, so I really love this. If you do a lot of pattern drafting and fitting, I highly recommend getting a French curve because it really helps you. You can see the difference between the curve I made here and the line I made here using my straight edge. And then this is a luxury 36-inch ruler, metal. This is 1 3/4 wide, which it's helpful to know that as well, because if you need to make a 1 3/4 strip of something like a waistband, you can just trace around the edges to make a straight 1 3/4 inch waistband. And then my big 48-inch ruler, which I've put in the corner. Those are my cool tools for today. If I've put links to where you can find all these things on Amazon, so if you're interested in checking those out, click the links below. If you're enjoying my content, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel because it helps me grow. And thank you guys so much for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day.